So, have you heard the news? Revolution in the air, comrades. If you've been watching the mainstream media lately, you'd know that the Occupy Wall Street protests have spread like wildfire, that the 99% are rising up worldwide to overthrow their cruel capitalist robber baron oppressors. Not feeling it? Neither am I. Tonight we'll bring you some perspective on who the Occupy protesters really are and what they're really after. It's time for some Canadian common sense. Now, if you're like me, you've had a tough time figuring out what the Occupy protesters actually want. We know what they're against. They have some abstract grievance with our capitalist system, but we really don't know what solutions they're proposing. So, our Sun News cameras headed out to the Occupy Toronto protest this weekend to try to crack the riddle. And what we found was interesting. Take this guy's advice, for example.
You don't have any great big ideas, solutions, or things you'd like to impose or implement. You just want people to be more excellent to each other generally?
Mass excellence. That's it.
That's it. Ladies and gentlemen, the future generation of leadership. Okay, so maybe that guy wasn't the most serious protester. How about someone more educated? He's a bright guy pursuing his PhD at Queen's, explaining why they're camping out in a public park.
Right now, I think this is a matter of getting people together, to communicate with each other, to come together and work on things together as a group, as a united people.
Yeah, man. He likes cooperation. We get it. Sounds like something children are taught in kindergarten. Actually, that dance circle he was in could have been right out of a kindergarten. Okay, how about someone more politically inclined, someone who actually follows the issues? Here's a young man from Rock the Vote, the group that tries to get young people involved in politics.
You're asking people to talk about, in a language that you understand, which policies do you want directly changed, what exactly are you protesting. But that's not what this is about. This is about waking up the entire populace to an entire range of issues that may not necessarily fit well in a news interview because they're controversial.
Yeah. That guy also told us he wanted the voting age lowered to 15 or 16 and that medicinal marijuana was one of his major issues. In fairness, some protesters had some concrete proposals. Watch this guy who's pursuing his master's at the University of Guelph telling us about the new system he's proposing.
And so what kind of system is that exactly?
Personally, I see it as a socialist or a communist system, but basically it's a system where there's no private property, where the people own the means of production and use them to satisfy their own needs. And so where there is no inequality, wealth is shared across society.
You hear that? No private property. Worked well in Russia. Or how about this guy who actually proposes forcibly exiling the rich to Switzerland?
What would folk here do without any rich people?
Well, I think we'd all be wealthier.
How?
Well, we have to strip them of their assets.
Oh, so before the rich left, you'd strip them of their assets?
Yes, he was holding a book titled Kill the Rich. What about this young communist who rationalizes killing in the name of the revolution?
And I think when you're killing people to protect a few, that can't ultimately be productive. Whereas, killing is never good, but when you're fighting a war with the long-term goal of maintaining working class control, maintaining control for all of society, that's a productive thing.
Well, at least he's honest. Communists did kill tens of millions in the name of their twisted ideology. Speaking of killing, how about this woman?
Stephen Harper is in a conspiracy to commit genocide as well.
Oh, really? Whereabouts?
Against the First Nations in Canada. Our history books have lied.
Yeah, Stephen Harper, mass murderer. She's also told our cameras how she's been pursuing a citizen's arrest of Stephen Harper. Some of the protesters are just incoherent, others downright scary. This is the rank and file of the Occupy protest movement. Now, if you're watching the mainstream media over the weekend, you probably didn't see this side of the protest. No, that wouldn't fit the elite's narrative. They love the story of capitalism under siege, the anti-Harper, anti-conservative message. They're lapping it up. it's more convenient for them to interview a slick union leader with a silver tongue. What's more, they love basking in the nostalgia of their own youthful adventures and radicalism. This is just a trip down memory lane for them. Golden oldies. Now, truth be told, I question the actual news value of these protests. A few thousand people showing up to protest in behalf of the 99%? Laughable. The math doesn't make any sense. Remember, in Canada, we just had an election and the Conservatives won. Look, I strongly suspect that most of the activists are simply from the ranks of the professional protest crowd. You hold a protest, they show up. Name a cause, they're on board. Ask your neighbors, just ask them if they're heading to the Occupy protest. Ask your coworkers and family. I know the answer I get. Do any of the protesters have any jobs? Do any of them pay taxes? I'd actually like to know. These protesters and these protests should be treated with a grain of salt, to say the least. Unfortunately, the elites in the mainstream media are only too happy to indulge them. Thank God Sun News is here to hold them all to account. And that's Canadian common sense. And when Sun News needs someone to hold Canada's elites to account, we can always rely on reporter Kris Sims in Ottawa. Hi, Kris.
Hello, Charles.
So you spent several hours in Toronto. You were in some of those shots being extremely professional, extremely non-judgmental, extremely patient. God bless you, Kris Sims.
Why, thank you very much. I wore my red beret and flew down there Friday night, and I spent more than 4 hours actually talking to these people and asking follow-up questions. It's something I don't usually hear other places.
Now, what do you suspect these folks are on? Are they just on euphemism, idealism, substances? Tell us more. You were there.
A bit of all of the above, to be honest. You know, there is a massive group of people from CUPE, for example, all in their purple T-shirts with their purple union flags. And so they were more, I would call, you know, the straight-laced or organized protesters, and all said similar things. They're angry at Labour Minister Lisa Raitt. And then there's, you know, a smattering of people who are generally dressed what people would describe as normally, who are standing around. You're not quite sure why they're there because they don't usually want to talk to the media. And then there was a huge number of people that I spoke with in those tapes. Again, I spoke with people for more than 4 hours and didn't repeat a guest once, and was startled by the number of people I spoke with that are calling for radical change to our financial system, to the capitalist system, to our government system, and they didn't know who the finance minister was.
Now, the finance minister is among many who are sort of blue chip power people trying to bend over backwards to be kind, to say that these people have a message. The message is legitimate. Even the Bank of Canada governor is paying lip service to it. You didn't see Jim Flaherty or Mark Carney there, did you?
No, I actually did see Bob Rae there at one point, and to give him credit, he wasn't part of the march. He showed up at the park afterwards because it's right in his constituency. And I said, "So why are you here, Mr. Rae?" And he said, "Well, I've got a couple thousand people gathering at my local park. I would be, you know, abject in my duty not to show up and at least talk to them." And while he was speaking with the media, as he's done many times before, a bunch of people actually started shouting him down, yelling, "Shame on you, Bob Rae," lots of words I can't say on the air, that sort of thing, and actually started climbing over barricades to get to him, and it got a little bit hairy. And one of the guys that jumped in between them was this very articulate man who knew all of his history and facts, who showed up there to tell these protesters, if you want to effect change, get involved in your local riding, get involved with your associations, join parties, and vote. A lot of the people I spoke with in those clips didn't vote either.
All right, let me focus on the Rae thing. I suspect that lots of people show up at parks and community centers in Bob Rae's riding, and Bob's not there because the cameras aren't. And on this particular day, we know the cameras were there. So the man has never missed an opportunity to get a camera shot. We understand that. That's his business. He's a retail politician. But what was it specifically about Bob Rae that they were saying? Was it because they felt he'd betrayed them because he left the NDP, or is it something else?
It wasn't that articulate, to be honest, Charles. It wasn't even that nuanced. Now, one person did yell out, "I want my Rae days back." So, meaning that's a reference, of course, to the economic system that he had while he was Premier of Ontario that right-wingers would describe as wrecking our system and left-wingers apparently liked. And then the others, it was just general detest, hatred even for the establishment, you know, mainstream media, all media, Sun media, any sort of recognizable politician, any sort of recognizable face. There was some venom there from a small group of people, and he actually had to move away from the crowd at one point. So Mr. Ray was there for a few minutes, but mostly I spent all of my time talking to protesters who had come there with signs, come there with some sort of message, and who wanted their voices heard. And I was startled also to notice, Charles, I basically had kind of a list to ask people. I think 2 people weren't truthers. Everybody else over 4 hours that I talked to who were there to protest thinks that 9/11 was an inside job. Okay, so they were truthers as well. Does that mean Mulcair was there? Because Mulcair's I did not see Mr. Mulcair there. Okay, Mulcair, the truther, was not there. Here's what I really want to know. When the people do bend over backwards in mainstream media and other places trying to say that we should take this seriously, the implication is that mainstream people will be joining up with this, just as mainstream people joined up with the Arab Spring, especially in Egypt, and, of course, in many, many other revolutions that we've read about, some of which we covered. If mainstream people don't show up, it's not going mainstream. This one isn't that complicated. Did you get the impression that this would grow into any kind of mainstream uprising? I didn't, and I spent a long time talking to the people, and there was a smattering of people who looked mainstream, if I can just say by the way they looked, and apart from the CUPE protesters, but we're so different from the United States. As it was pointed out by Finance Minister Jim Flaherty, you know, our banks did not go corrupt and fail. We didn't have tax dollars going to those banks. We don't have as wide a gap between rich and poor. We do have a social safety net. Things are just so much different from Wall Street. Our unemployment rate is one of the lowest in the Western world. And so we're very different from Wall Street. There is a certain segment of Wall Street that's saying, I don't want 1 red cent of my tax dollars going to these corrupt banking officials. And a lot of people have a lot of time for that sort of argument. Here, it just doesn't ring right, if you know what I mean. It just doesn't sound right. And when I've asked people that, and I've asked them about, what about the unemployment rate? What about the fact that we have a huge social safety net? You can take a year off after you have a baby. All sorts of things in Canada that you can't do in the United States. A lot of them were just mystified, Charles. They just didn't know. They just wanted to be at a protest, and the facts didn't really matter. They were like so many people who do things like, teach school, write columns. The conclusion is there, and the facts be damned. That seems to be what it was, at least the people I spoke with over those 4 hours. At one point, a guy just in a regular leather jacket kind of said, are you going to talk to any normal people? I said, well, would you like to talk to me? No, I don't want to talk to the Sun News Network. I don't want to talk to any reporters. So, and I must point out that there were quite a few times where I would go to speak with one individual and someone else would jump in and say, don't talk to them, they're with the media, or don't talk to them, they're with Sun News. I thought this was supposed to be a leaderless, free speech, protest movement. And I was stunned by the amount of horning in and bullying that was going on at this protest. And it was only the first day. If you see internet footage of the Wall Street protest, you see several times where so-called lifers at the Occupy Wall Street movement are horning in and bullying other people, younger people who wish to speak to cameras, who wish to speak to reporters. That happened on several occasions to me while I was trying to talk to people. Yeah, these are role models for a new world, some kind of world. Kris Sims, thank you so much for the patience and everything that you've done, and we'll get you back on again soon. Thanks for the visit. You bet. You're welcome.